All right, check. I got 3 cameras rolling and 2 microphones in the red.
Speaking of technological genius, Brandon Rahi has set up our system again.
Total nonsense with what we've got.
Golf clap.
Oh, man. We're back to golf already.
It looks so lovely in here. I just need one more light, please.
We can get some more lights.
Yes, please. Like right here.
We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lights in front of us. And the 2 little blues behind us, which are lovely.
I feel so lucky.
Okay, let's get to this. We got to figure out how to do this in a productive manner,
Well, I mean, get to it then.
which is on me to try to organize this if I can, if I could be so organized. So, sent you some topics. What I landed on was more or less talking about the policies that exist in our federal government that more or less are rules for thee, but not for me. That if you did any of these things, you would probably end up in jail. Yet they seem to get away scot-free. So these actions that I'm referring to feel blatantly unethical at minimum, or corrupt, but are technically legal in the system. So I'm going to read off a list of these topics and then we'll dive into them.
Sounds good.
Sounds fun. Okay, so most of these things have been discussed at one point or another, but we're going to see if we can get into the weeds on these things. Number 1, insider trading by members of Congress. 2 is campaign contributions. Obviously, that buys influence. 3, the revolving door between government and lobbying. 4, pork barrel spending and earmarks. 5, lying to the public, but not under oath. Under oath is a crime. 6, using taxpayer money for personal perks. 7, suppressing accountability through committee control. And 8, deliberate gridlock for fundraising. So, keeping it simple, we can go into this one by one. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of crossover, but first on the list was insider trading by members of Congress. What are your initial thoughts on that?
I mean, the whole list is using your position as an advantage, not for, helping people. Look, any job that has a benefit is a plus, right? But we're talking about like health insurance for a job that you do, or maybe an extra week off or something. Not manipulating a currency, a stock exchange or whatever, and contract bids for yourself. And, that's one of the 7. And greed, and you say this all the time, that you get excited about an individual maybe that would go up and be productive, that you think, okay, this is going to be the guy. He's going to do this. He's going to make a difference. He's not going to become this. And I mean, you don't have to name names. You can pick one. And it's just so unfortunate because it makes us all lose so much faith in what little system is hanging on. And I wouldn't classify that as really stealing, but it is massive manipulation, because defense contracts, you go by Northrop and 4 defense contractors bid on whatever, and then that Northrop's going to win the bid, and you go buy the stock and you make millions of dollars, and excuse me, but you can't do that.
Right. None of that's public. None of that's public info, and you having that inside scoop on that gives you the position to. You're not calling it stealing, but
It's cheating.
It's absolutely cheating. I mean, the cards are stacked in your favor with that inside information. Not only just the information, you could cheat infinitely just with the information, but then furthermore, the voting power to make those things happen. So,
but we all know it. And all of these things we're going to circle back to. we all know this is happening. So again,
Absolutely.
why is no one
So
being
that,
punished? You
that-
know, like you said, I saw that on part and it didn't really get read there. But again, if we
Yeah.
all know it's happening, it's evident that somebody goes in with a certain net worth and then they come out with a pile, or if they ever come out at all, you know, a term or whatever, you know.
Nancy Pelosi is the example everyone goes to, right? Because it's so overwhelming. So according to this, the average return in the market is 8% last year, and Pelosi's portfolio beat the market by 45%.
That's pretty good. She's smart.
She is a whiz.
Super smart.
Yeah, she must really understand the market.
I saw something one time, interview, and it might have been with Tucker, and he had the guy on that has the app that tracks her investments.
Right. Yep.
Hey, look, do what Pelosi does.
Yep.
So does that square up the field? The fact that, hey, you can do it, whatever.
Yeah. That, I feel like that was an attempt at it by, the only power that the public has is to just try to copy her moves, but she's still how many steps ahead of you, you're still reacting to her move, right? Mm-hmm. She does it first and you follow it. So the House Ethics Committee hasn't expelled a single member in over a decade, despite dozens of credible allegations. And the average fine for violating the Stock Act on insider trading is $200. $200.
Suspicious, man. That's some deterrent if you've ever seen it.
Yeah. So watch out if you get caught. That $200 is really going to devastate that 45% return on many millions of dollars.
Yeah, circle back on who's making that rule.
Right.
Who presented that?
The self-governance is insane.
Look, we will slap you on the wrist. It's going to cost you $200.
Yeah. We'll make the rule. We'll also enforce the rule. We'll make the committee. We'll do all the things. So, okay. So insider trading, absolutely out of control. And I feel like that, the same pattern of behavior just trickles into all these other categories. So we're going to keep this moving as best as we can. Number 2, campaign contributions. So corporations and lobbyists can donate huge sums of money to politicians' campaigns. Obviously, the politicians then return the favor through how they sign off on their votes and legislation. So basically, this is referred to as legalized bribery, but it's dressed up as free speech. So how do you feel about campaign contributions?
Well, this is destructive. You point to one industry, and big pharma, okay, and just since COVID, we've all lost so much faith. Everything's pre-COVID, post-COVID, right?
Yeah.
That's the way we look at things in all these generations. But how much faith we've lost in that institution, if you had it to begin with. And now that the rug's been pulled out and you realize that all of these drugs and all of these things that we've been taking are a reaction to this and reaction to that, and you're just being pushed medication after medication after treat this with this, treat this with that. None of it's natural. None of that. It's all, you know what I'm saying. But that in itself has far more of an impact than somebody making extra money on the side, stock trading. Okay, it's different.
Yeah.
But now you're into something, and I'm using one example, and that's Big Pharma, of how it is devastating families' health, children's health, vaccinations, however, that's just like a huge blanket you can throw over the whole thing. And that one thing, if Big Pharma gives, donates, Bayer, whatever, it donates to. AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, whoever donates to so-and-so, and then they're beholden to that, and then they pass more drugs, more vaccinations, more schedules, more this, more that, and that has a direct impact on your life as opposed to somebody else taking money out of greed. But now you have a direct impact on your community and your life and your family.
Yeah.
And that's a bigger crime to me than the other one.
So it's...
How do you raise money for politics?
people, I think, view campaign contributions as companies being nice to support the, naive people, I would say, to support the politician of their liking, as opposed to viewing it as they're just buying outcomes, which obviously reiterates everything you just described. And we've talked a lot about my lack of faith in the system because of all of this structure that's in place, such as campaign contributions, that you voting for a candidate means almost nothing to me. We've seen far, far, far more examples of how it's same old all the time, and very few breakout individuals try to, let's say, drain the swamp. And everybody just seems to toe the line. And anyway, you just mentioned Bayer, by the way. Did you see they just acquired Monsanto? You see that?
It's shocking.
We won't go down that rabbit hole. We'll save that for another one.
Yeah, I can take that into the ditch right now.
You went after such a small example of campaign contributions.
Bayer's
big pharma,
a German company too. That also, in the history, Bayer came from, a direct correlation with the Nazi Party and many, many drugs that were produced.
Oh man, here we go. Hold on.
Okay,
buckle up, folks.
No, I'm out. Parachute. I'm gonna go to the next one. I'm not gonna do it.
Okay, so moving down the list. Number 3 is the revolving door between government and lobbying, and how basically you walk in the door as a public office, holding a public office position, and the moment you leave that public office position, you walk into this big corporation job. And obviously people have been advocating for getting rid of that, that the person regulating at the FDA, the moment they leave that, boom, they're working for Bayer or whoever. And the same for defense and every other industry. So people are advocating for changes there. So what are your thoughts on that revolving door? Government seems like a stepping stone to me. It almost seems like that is the end goal.
Working for a defense company, again, you're becoming, someone's putting you in that spot at Northrop Grumman as a general or whatever else as a senator, and you've got intelligence clearance, or you go to the FDA or from none of that should be allowed. But in the other hand, though, there has to be some level of expertise that a general would possess, that you would want them to give some sort of, okay, look, we use this weapon system for this for so long. There's something new over here, but this A-10 still works like, the A-10 is a prime example. Still works. There's no close air support like that. So, but it's outdated, and now it's going into drones or whatever. But to me, it's such a conflict of interest that it's a shame you actually can't use the expertise that a person possesses because you don't trust their conflict of interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's
because I should be able to say, this dude's a 4-star general, 3-star general. He's a colonel. He was head of the cavalry. He ought to know something about this. And now he's working for Northrop Grumman, or he's a lobbyist for this. Not working for it, but he's lobbying for this weapon system. But for this, but is he doing that out of money or expertise?
Yes, money. I can't get past the money on any of it. It's all just money to me.
Right. That was a silly question. Is he? Okay, that's not what I meant. What's a shame is you can't trust and use his expertise because your assumption of his greed is overwhelming.
And that's where I think we need to get rid of lobbying in some capacity. I would like to see it gone altogether. So that you can have an expert in the field working for the people, supposed to be working for the people, and we can have some faith in that individual and in that position, in that job title. at the government level. And,
Okay.
and yes, they need to be experts in their field. It's not like experts in their field only go into the private sector. I would almost rather them be in the private sector first to some degree, get that experience, that real world experience, make your money, and then see how you can use that for good for the people and no longer be tempted by, hey, government first, private sector next, because that is always the next best thing, and the big dollar signs tempting you, and people are pulling at your strings the whole time. And so I would love to see a disconnect there to regain some faith in our institutions.
Yep.
So the general example, it's like while he was coming up to be a 4-star general, at what point was he corrupted by Northrop Grumman or whoever? Mm-hmm. And therefore he started.
We're not just picking on Northrop. It's just an example.
Just an example. So at what point along the timeline was that general making decisions based on the bucks versus, man, this is truly the best weapon system that I think is right for our country and our people.
And it's going to keep our people safe.
And it's going to keep our people safe. And that's why he's making that vote, as opposed to, hey, if you push this along, we got a spot for you when you're done. Mm-hmm. Right. And we've seen far too many examples of that to think that's not happening.
Well, you mentioned going from politics or military to lobbying. What about the person who is just a lobbyist? Like I fished with a person who works for the paper industry last week, who was, not last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever. He was on the boat, and he's trying to advance his company's products, and he's a lobbyist, and he's involved in, he's selling pellets, he's selling pulp, he's selling paper, he's selling, all different forms of, fuel wood, whatever, selling a lot of stuff to China, selling, tariffs are a concern of his, but he's advancing his private company. Seemed like a pretty legit guy. He was a lobbyist, and he was in some heavy meeting rooms just a few weeks ago. But he's advancing his company's interest and employees' interest. Do you think that's different, right? As opposed to coming from to go to, because you have the connections from, you're just trying to advance something that you think's good for the advancement of your company, and you're lobbying the government to see, I need to sell more fuel wood right now, to China for whatever reason. He doesn't have a dog in the fight. Maybe he's kicking contributions on the back end for campaigns or something. But there's a difference in the military guy coming out and that point that you cross and becoming corrupted in that field, as opposed to this lobbyist trying to advance his company.
So I think that ends up serving the same function. The lobbyist just has less control than that person that
Less
had
advantage.
a voice directly in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lobbyist is outside the door, but the general is inside the war room telling his peers, this is what we need to do, right? Whereas the lobbyist has to wait for that general to step out that door to pull him aside and say, hey, here's what we need, blah, blah, blah. And so you're making a point that the paper lobbyist, we'll go with this example, he's just trying to get a good product through, and that may be the case. It could be that simple. I don't have that faith. But why do lobbyists get this kind of special avenue through to government that then creates policy, which then rewards this private company? Whereas most industries, if I'm selling something here locally, just running a small business, that has nothing to do with the government necessarily on average, en masse. And so why do certain big, huge companies get lobbyist positions where they circumnavigate the traditional methods of marketing and branding and all of these things, and they kind of just go straight for the big dog because there's taxpayer dollars there? and the government doesn't really care where that money came from because it's not money they earned, and round we go. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying, but I think you're missing the point. What I'm saying is there a difference between the two?
Yeah,
One that's
I think it's a degree of separation.
okay.
So the general in the room was in the war room, him having absolute control to place a vote, to check a box somewhere, member of Congress. The general's maybe not the best example, but
Similar to insider trading
so
is what
if,
I'm saying.
yes. So if a member of Congress is going to vote yes on a policy that rewards their bank account in the stock market because they voted yes, and they voted yes knowing, hey, that's going to bump me 48%, of course they're going to vote yes. I would challenge any of our viewers to give me an example to the contrary in the comments. Who has had skin in the game, knowing that member of Congress or whatever had skin in the game in a company, and they voted against the interest of said company? I would love to see one example.
Unicorn.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. So revolving door between government and lobbying. Next on the list was pork barrel spending and earmarks. This is an easy one to me. I feel like everybody agrees on this and just nobody pays any attention to it, which is the whole point. So Congress adding unrelated like pet projects to massive spending bills to funnel money into their districts in usually their local areas to earn favor. So an example of this would be, hey, I am in Florida. I want new Florida visitor information centers along our highways. And I want to, in this 1,000-page bill that's talking about, immigration and save the whales and all these other things, all of a sudden there's this little tiny footnote. Oh yeah, also $20 million to Florida visitor information centers. And no one ever touches it because the bill is so big. It's just dog-eared in there. So it's unread, unchecked, snuck in there.
So what would you'd have a specific bill for a specific purpose for that only.
That's
Period.
my view. That look, if we can't,
Well, isn't that what it was designed for?
well,
I don't know the history of these types of bills,
yeah,
and I'd be interested to say when. I'd be curious to know when that started happening. Okay, when do you start attaching stuff to a defense spending bill? When do you start attaching agriculture stuff to a defense bill or whatever it may be, vice versa, whatever, and then I understand your point. But the system itself was designed to, all right, look, we need new bridges or need new interstates, new counties, whatever, the interstate system needs work, period. This money is for that. That's all.
right.
That's
Right.
all. It's not for the whatever in whatever
Yep.
county it's going through or whatever. It's for that. And that's it. All right, everybody approves. We need that. We got to have that. Let's do this. And let's fix that problem.
Yeah.
Because that problem that you hang the name onto that it may, hey, interstate highway bill, it's going to fix up the interstates for like 4 miles, and it's going to spend $70 million somewhere else.
Right.
It's just so counterproductive. Nothing gets done.
Yeah. So a bill, in recent history, bills that would be titled Florida Interstate Bill would have on page 972, it would be like, well, we also are funding cocaine usage by snails in Guatemala research. It's like, wait, what? The bill's called and people are annoyed by that. Okay, so to your point,
Snails are doing cocaine. It's possible.
probably with what our government decides is appropriate spending of our tax dollars.
How
I would
fast
say
can we
yes.
get this snail to move? That's a good one, man.
Racing snails, baby. Okay, so this is saying, I just Googled when did things start getting packed into bills? And this is saying the first omnibus bill was passed in 1950. The practice became more frequent, especially after the 1980s, and particularly since 2007. So And we've seen that a lot in the news recently, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden 1,000-page bill got dropped on a Friday evening and they're voting on it Monday morning. And the two-party system, it's like, well, they have some things in there they want, and they're just using this omnibus to negotiate. And there's so many topics in there that nobody even knows what they're voting on. They just look at the 2 or 3 major issues they want, and the rest just gets swept under the rug. And that's how these things pass through. And I was hoping that DOJ would kind of uncover a lot more of that already than it has.
But they're uncovering some of it.
They're uncovering some of it.
As you were telling me
That's right.
the other day, is they're blocking them from actually implementing the changes that they're discovering, right?
Right. They're
'Cause
right. So even the Republicans, unfortunately, have basically blocked DOJ's changes from being permanent.
Yep.
So temporary Band-Aids.
Yep.
Okay, so that's pork barrel spending earmarks. Next up, number 5 is lying to the public. So again, this is not under oath. Lying under oath is still considered a crime, but we've all seen the campaign trail, right? All these empty promises, free tacos every day, whatever, and just lying through their teeth. They'll say or do anything to get the job, and then pretty much role reversal the moment they're in office. So they lie regularly. And just because it's not under oath, no consequence. So what are your thoughts on that? So here's the thing, right? If you or I lie to the government on our tax forms, at the end of the day, we would end up in jail. Follow that trail long enough, we're in jail, but they can lie to us like crazy to get us to act, i.e. vote in their favor, and then wet the bed.
Just goes back, it goes back so far, so deep, is to manipulate people.
Yeah.
Truth is so elusive, but it's so obvious. And again, have you seen such an erosion in belief? But I mean, in our lifetimes, we think, oh, well, in the last 10 years, it just seems, or whenever, you go back to what you can remember, WMD or whatever you choose, why we went into Kuwait. Do we really know? How far back were the lies? And, it goes back in infinite history. But for us, it seems like the old guys on the porch currently we are, that it just like fell off a cliff at 2020.
Yeah.
Or even 20, it just fell off a cliff. Like nothing you see or they say out of their mouth, no matter what I say to you, because I want to have some hope, and you've got none. You're out. You're done. It's over for you. You're cooked. And I want to still have hope and faith. But, I mean, the lie, it's just like, look, I don't know. I know what it means to manipulate the truth and why you do it. Okay, there's been times in my life where I've done that, and I was deceived, and I was deceiving, but it was all for my own gain. And just the truth, man, just the truth, and man, it's painful.
Yeah,
it's painful. And for what goes around on that though, one thing is you can't handle the truth. The people really don't want to know what's really going on in the truth. It's just like, man. Who are you to say something like that if you're a politician? There's so much going on in the background that you just don't understand. But you got it.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
You, the anointed, will save us all from that knowledge. And
anyway.
Yeah. And the part of the hypocrisy that came down, COVID is obviously a turning point in the world, but I'll speak on American experience in politics when all that information was coming out and they started to push this jab through and people started to question that. And then how much censorship came through social medias, right? The Facebook, Instagram platforms, and how conservative voices just got buried and you couldn't even access the correct information. And they were labeling everything as misinformation or disinformation. All of a sudden we had a new lexicon of types of lies. And yet the politicians, Anthony Fauci, the highlight reels of him masks are ridiculous. They don't work. And then it switches all the way to, yeah, we need 3 masks and everything in between. And nothing, no accountability, no recourse. What you know?
And that whole situation is far more evil than just telling the truth. You know, that whole thing. I mean, you go back to, what was it, Project 2010 or whatever, when they did the rehearsal, you know, of the global pandemic and, you know, all of that went down. Like, Gates was involved, all those people were involved in the rehearsal of a global pandemic.
Yeah, pandemic.
And knowing what was in those vaccines and pushing it, and, you know, the motives and that's evil. That's not just not true.
Right.
It's evil.
Yeah.
But when you step your foot in and you lie, you're opening the door. And you're opening the door for darkness in all forms. And, you know, period. The truth is the truth. But when you start lying and you live on untruth, your life is a charade, and you're a charade, and evil creeps in small levels, whatever it may be, or massive levels like that, you know. Just
Yeah, I can't imagine that once someone at that level of platform, I mean, and influence and power, once they've put out a lie out there, how many more bad decisions they have to do to protect that lie. I mean,
you don't have to remember the truth.
Yeah.
You know, the truth is the truth, and when
Right.
you know the truth, you don't have to remember it. You know, this stays the same. If you've experienced your experience of, you know the truth. But, you know, when you have to remember the lie, it changes.
Yeah. As they say, the truth takes few words, lies take many. Okay, moving on. Lying to the public. Next up, using taxpayer money for personal perks. So lavish travel, security perks, personal staff, office upgrades, all taxpayer funded.
Come on. Geez, taxes. I mean, come on, just waste, lie, pork spending, stealing, manipulating, driving in jets. I mean, all this is just, yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, taxes. Yeesh. I can take myself in the ditch on that. And then on the other side of that is property taxes. You already own that.
Yeah.
Why are you still getting taxed on that?
Yeah.
I already own things, and you're still taxing me on it. You know, I'm not getting taxed on this hat, but I'm getting taxed on my land that I own outright. You know, I'm still paying property tax. Crazy. So then you pay that tax. You say, okay, pay these taxes, do some good with it,
Right.
and then lavish, unsupervised spending of parties and free-for-alls and travel and
Snails doing
expenditures.
cocaine.
Snails, speedy snails. But I mean, okay, I gotta pay taxes. And then you find out this kind of stuff's being done with the tax money. It's like, give me your money, and then whoosh,
Yeah.
slap you in the face too.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing an itemized breakdown for, let's say you spend, I don't know, let's say your tax bill's $10,000 a year at the end of the year, whether it's 10,000 or 100,000, whatever it is. But if you saw an itemized breakdown from that figure, $10,000, if you saw how many dollars and cents were going to every little thing and how long of a list that would be, hey, a nickel went to this and a dime went to that and a dollar went there and $20 went there, you would vote out 90% of it, I feel. And that's what I was hoping that Doge would kind of unpack all that, but you certainly wouldn't be signing up for, yes, check, I want some of that going to Bernie Sanders' private jets while he goes and fights the oligarchy and just about everything else on the list. So again, transparency, right? We have these things that they announce these multi-billion-dollar deals and bills, and you have no idea where that money's going, and most of it ends up just at admin fees anyway, and what good is being done, and hard to see.
Well, it's being uncovered, and all of our suspicions are becoming known. But you circle back and say, well, what now? What are you going to do now? Is somebody going to pay the price? Is somebody going to be, not pay a $200 fine? More than, what now? What now? And nothing keeps changing. As much information is out there, I get kind of scared of what the eventual culmination of it will be. The frustrations of some people. It just gets scary, because it's so frustrating on my end to think about all the money I spend on taxes.
Yeah. And what do you have to show for it? Not as much as you should.
I'm biting my tongue right now.
Yep, that's fine. That's fine. Pulling our punches just a hair here. Okay, moving on. Suppressing accountability through committee control. So what we're really referring to here is that Congress controls its own ethics investigations. The ethics committee is made up of other politicians. So that's criminals deciding if other criminals should be incriminated, or if so, by how much. This is mind-blowing to me that we have these things called ethics committees, yet I think the statistic I read earlier was nobody's been basically held to account in the last decade. Wow. How is that statistically possible amongst a pool of that many people? It's not. So anyway, suppressing accountability through committee control. These committees being...
The fox is running a hen house, man.
That's right.
This is where I think, circling back to the first one, is where you lose faith in the whole thing. You did this, you did that. Okay, you did this. No. Okay, wait a minute. You're supposed to pay this fine. You come back around and say, wait a minute. Oh, this guy did it too. He's on the same committee. That goes away.
Yeah.
Or this guy knows something about you, or this guy was held. He's got some picture of you doing something else, and your brother or your sister, and then the blackmail gets involved, and then.
Yep. Wish we had some separation there. The three branches of government are designed to be a system of checks and balances, and however, once something just drops into that ethics committee, I feel like all bets are off, and that's just theater, and it's just so that the legacy media can put out, oh, so-and-so is going before the ethics committee. And we've heard that headline a million times, which to get put in that position where you're going before something called the ethics committee, something's obviously egregious and in question. How is it that they all seem to turn out okay and nobody did anything wrong? That's just ludicrous to me. So I don't see the system of checks and balances within that. I wish there was some separation between government and the people, but that would require transparency to turn over all the evidence, right, during
the last thing
discovery periods.
The last thing you hear is so-and-so is going before the ethics committee. Weeks go by, and it's like, okay, what happened?
Crickets.
Where? I just saw this guy at the Super Bowl or something. What happened to that? He's throwing out the first pitch. What's going on here? The last thing you hear.
Yep.
If there's some issue was, and then the rug comes out and it all gets swept under.
Yep. Okay, what's the next topic here? We've got taxpayer money from large purse, using campaign funds for personal lifestyle.
Lashes. 40 lashes.
I'm down. What's it? What is it? Ultimately, the question I almost wanted this podcast to just be about was accountability. I mean, we're talking about that in a very itemized way, but it's like, what would it take to earn back the trust of the American people when they look towards our elected leaders? I kind of know what my answer is, but you just mentioned 40 lashes.
You talking an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth type stuff? Punishment
could be, but any sort of accountability, even if it was at the base level, you're removed from your position, like that. Mm-hmm. How many strikes does it take in an ethical sense where you are I know you didn't want to use the term stealing, but you are cheating the American people. You are voting on policy that affects the people negatively because it pads your account. And so what should happen to that person? Where's the accountability? They don't even lose their jobs. If anything, they get promoted. And when they choose to exit office, then they get a 100x paying position in the private sector. So how are we not, at a minimum, removing them from office immediately?
It's not that I didn't want to say stealing. The first part was cheating.
Yeah.
The last three are stealing.
Yes. Yes.
That's stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, your question was what just now? It was what happens to resume confidence.
Right. What does it take?
Have to lose your position at the very minimum, and then you have to be punished, and what have you. But I don't ever. I mean, and I have hope. I don't ever see that happening. I don't ever see someone currently being held accountable. And I used to think, okay, they're coming in. They're going to do it. Cash is going to do it, man.
Yeah.
And I'm still holding out hope. He's building evidence.
I've heard that my whole life. We're building a case. We're checking into everything. We're investigating. We're going through the process.
But what has to change? What has to change?
And that's why I don't necessarily have faith. I don't see how. I'll use Cash as an example. As aggressive as he spoke going into that nomination, leading up to that, before he even knew he was nominated. So it's like he had all that stuff out there, his interviews, on Sean Ryan and such. Mm-hmm. I mean, man, it was exactly what some people really wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was all the conviction in the world to go in and clean house. And, his update the other day was kind of like, well, we've arrested a lot of criminals. Not one in-house. I didn't see any pulling of the swamp plug to drain it. It was just business as usual. FBI was conducting, kind of business as usual. That's how I saw it anyway. I did not see anything revolutionary where I was like, yes, it's happening.
Do you think that if you're that man or that person and you're like, you actually want to do those things? You actually want to do those things. And then all of a sudden you're presented with a thing to where you just can't. It's just impossible for you to do. What do you do? Do you go on a interview and say, this is what I saw, this is what happened, a live interview somewhere where they can't take back what you said. I've seen the tapes. This guy was on it, 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 this guy was on it. What has to happen for you to actually do that? And get to the point where I can't believe I can't actually do what I said I'm going to do. I can't. I thought I really was going to be able to do it. What are they holding? I'm going to take your. If you do this, I'm going to wipe so and so out or whatever. What prevents them from doing it? Involvement, or blackmail, or threats, or what have you.
Yeah, all the above. I would appreciate somebody.
Is it all the above?
Well, answer your involvement. Answer your own. Involvement's the low hanging fruit here, right? Hey, you're involved, therefore, you have put on this charade to get into the position where you can protect yourself and your minions. Right. That's an obvious one for me. I mean, that's why we haven't seen anything from Epstein, in my opinion, because they're all involved. Yeah. And I would appreciate somebody, even if they didn't come out and say all the names, but if they came out and said, hey, look, I had full conviction to come into this position and unleash hell and burn it down and pull the rug out from everybody and pull the curtain back. And I absolutely want to do it. And from what I've seen, I can't. It's like, even if somebody said, I can't even explain to you exactly why I can't, but I can't. I want to, but I can't. That would be at least a peek behind the curtain of like, hey, look, there are strings here, bigger, thicker, stronger strings than we on average realize. And I think, quoting James O'Keefe's recent statement where he said, look, if you're in those positions, what's your price? Is it, whatever his numbers were, 10,000, 10 million, $200 million? Because if the price isn't your life, then you're for sale. That's how he put it. Yeah. And if you mix in involvement, blackmail, threats, the things you mentioned, then I don't know if being threatened that's not the same as for sale, but
if your intentions are good, but the threats are real.
Yeah.
If somebody, wants to take out your family or something, and you're trying to do right, and that's actually going to happen or could happen.
My ego makes me think that I could, under that threat,
you're somehow the guy, you don't have any family.
Somehow go dark, right? Pull loved ones off the grid, hide them away, tuck them away, and then keep fighting the fight and just burn it down as best as I can, Oh man, what's it going to take to clean all this up? That's as little as you could have walked through the door. Okay, so those are some of the major issues going on that I see, that I actually think huge majority of this country, everyday people, would sit here and agree on this stuff, right? I've never had a conversation where somebody's like, well, sure, they should be able to do insider trading. Well, sure, they should be able to use those funds however they want. Well, sure, they should sneak in little spending here and there amongst these big bills. Every conversation I've had, people have agreed on most of the topics we just discussed. Okay. So if the power is supposed to be with the people, and we huge majority agree on these types of topics, why aren't they enacted? So what can we do about it? That was the segue. So policies now on those points, right? Some of which we've already discussed. So I'm going back to the top of the list on insider trading. Obviously, we could ban congressional stock trading. They had the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act proposed multiple times. And of course, it's died in committee every single time. You're asking the criminals.
That's the fix, though. Hey, wait a minute. No, stop. You just fixed the problem. You fixed the problem. That's it. You serve. You can't do that. Fix the problem. It's over right there.
I don't follow.
You ban. It is illegal, period. If you do this, you fix the problem. That is the fix. Period. You ban stock trading at all while you're in Congress. You can't do it. You can't do any of it. That's the fix.
Right. But I'm saying they've proposed that act many times, and it dies every time because you're asking the criminals to self-regulate their criminal. So how do we get that through? If the laws are in place where, and that's the irony of this whole list, right, is that all of these proposals would require them to vote against their own self-interests. So, and this is part of the reason why I don't have any faith in the system, is how would we get any of these proposals that we're about to go through, including this one, how would they ever pass? Because who votes against their own self-interest? Only a selfless person, or someone that doesn't have, corruption on their heart, or greed, or someone has leverage against them, and. Sounds good on paper, though. The Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act. Sign me up. Over 70% of Americans support the reform.
That's all?
That sounds low to me. I don't know. The 30 other percent must be married to politicians. Okay.
Or lobbyists.
Moving on. Or lobbyists. Thank you. Number 2, outlaw lobbying for X amount of years after leaving office. We've heard about this recently that, hey, look, if you're regulating the FDA, when you leave the FDA,
that recently
you
just get shot down.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
recently.
Again, the Hatch Act. This is, the proposal here is 10-year ban or lifetime ban on that. If you work in this industry, you can't go, or excuse me, if you work in this department in office, you then can't go work for the industry. That's, 0 degrees of separation. So that'd be I feel like an easy one that we could all approve of and agree on. It's nice to think that you can cross party lines and agree on some things in today's climate. And I feel like this stuff is low hanging fruit. But when the two-party system is just in cahoots and they're both doing things behind closed doors to make sure they retain power no matter who is in office, I don't see any of these things ever.
It's like all the things you need to know you learned in kindergarten. You know, just don't do that. You know, it's supposed to be that. My first thing about that is that you learn something in the military. You have expertise. You really do. But you sold it out, and you can't be trusted, and we can't use you anymore because you sold it out. The 12 Rules. What was it? Remember that book?
Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life?
Not 12 Rules. All you needed to know you learned in kindergarten. You ever read that book?
No, I did not.
Put things back. Don't take from others. Put things back where you found them. Blah, 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 blah.
Sounds like it's roughly based off the 10 Commandments for kindergartners.
I'm going to look that up real quick.
The third topic was to ban all earmarks and force line item transparency. So this is, instead of those omnibus bills where they're putting in those little spending things amongst this 1,000-page bill, they've got to be single subjects, right? Single subject proposals, no more 1,000-page bills with mystery, as they call it, mystery pork. You've got to have enough time to get some public debate going on it. And so things need to be available for public review for X amount of time beforehand. So minimum 72 hours. But if a bill's 1,000 pages, you're never going to get through that effectively in 72 hours anyway. I mean, offices are distributing that much work amongst, dozens of people, and they still can't discover all these little earmarked items. So banning those things would be great. And you wouldn't have to ban anything if you had single issue bills, in my opinion, because it would be super obvious and transparent. Hey, X amount of money is going to Z policy, and here's all the proposals that go with it. But number 4 is going to be public campaign financing and donation caps. So some of this stuff already exists. The general public doesn't follow this stuff a whole lot, and this stuff gets tied up in court all the time because of campaign finance violations. But of course, we never hear the conclusions of any of that, which is part of the problem. Again, it dies in the ethics committee or whatever. So instituting strict limits on donations and fully fund elections with public money would be a major one. So you're going to get away from all the corporate donations, and it's got to come down to an individual.
Look how many attempts have been made through the years to try to fix this problem, and there's always this circle back of super PAC and this, and, all this stuff.
Right.
Well, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way.
Right.
I've heard the argument made where we just can't regulate that. I mean, that's not. Every time there's something that actually here's something to where something is passed. There are rules. There are things in place to, but there's always a loophole. Somebody always goes around that, and to try, and it's all about corrupting the system or the person or the individual or whatever,
Yeah. That's the catch, right? Is that you can't sever the link between a major corporate donation and the outcomes that they're expecting. So if you got it down to just people and you had caps, the other thing would be force real-time disclosure of all donations not hidden until after elections, right? So if before the election, as it's happening, hey, yesterday, Elon donated X to Trump or whatever, that kind of thing, you could follow that in real time as it goes. And that would be interesting for transparency, but of course that would take a lot of work for the people to get involved to follow it.
This is just the first 5, okay?
Okay, we're reading from...
All I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten.
Okay. This is a book, huh?
Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say sorry when you hurt somebody, etc., etc., etc. It's so simple. I mean, the list goes on. It says the same stuff, Yeah. These are the common. They're so simple, and man just corrupts all of this.
add money into that, and as adults, and we're all screwed. I'm not challenging the suggestions there. That's for sure. But
wash your hands, keep yourself clean. Blah blah. I read that book a long time ago.
yeah, well, I'll have to give that a read. Not one I've referenced.
Play fair, share, put things back where you belong, clean up your mess. Don't take things that aren't yours.
You wouldn't play fair in a war, in a fight against your enemy.
Are we in a war with our own government?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All capital letters.
Careful.
Bold. Underline. How are we? How are we not? We won't go into that. Tell you guys how I really feel. So moving on to number 5, Independent Ethics Enforcement Agency. We touched on this earlier, right? This ethics committee, where, in my opinion, criminals are a committee
so you're
amongst
saying
criminals.
that have to be non-governmental. A citizens ethics police of the Congress.
Yes. Yes. Create a nonpartisan ethics watchdog with power to investigate and prosecute members of Congress, DOJ, etc.
Citizens militia police force.
And then they get bought because somebody. See what I did there?
Yes.
Because it's a circle.
I told you about the circle earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we, how long would it take if that citizens watchdog was created? How many seconds would it
24
take
hours,
before it was corrupt?
max,
That
before it
person's
was corrupt.
phone, email, knocks on the door, their whole life would be turned upside down if they actually had any power over the powers that be. But yeah, trying to get politicians out of that. And again, the politicians would probably have to sign off on this, which is nutty. Who polices the police? All right, next up, criminalize. Yeah, right. We need a worldly version. No? Is there value in having a worldly...
Lost me at worldly.
A worldly...
We are not at war with municipalities, flesh.
It affects so many people and disenfranchises so many people and kills so many people and ruins lives. So you would think that men, worldly men, could govern this stuff. Okay, moving on. Let's keep chatting. Criminalize false statements by public officials. So we have slander, we have libel, but in lying under oath, and again, I'll circle back to, if I lie to the government, I'm in big trouble. I end up in jail. But when the government is lying to you all day, every day, whether that's on the campaign trail or whatever else, interviews on legacy media, episode, anything like that, there's nothing. So we could set a new bar for accountability in office. Obviously, this is First Amendment stuff, right? Hey, you're allowed to say whatever you want. But there are little nuggets there that yelling fire in a crowded theater is kind of the example everybody uses. So is there recourse, or should there be special consequence for politicians in office if they're elected by the people, for the people, and then they lie to your face repeatedly or even once?
Should the punishment be worse?
I think our politicians...
If there was actually ever any punishment enforced?
Which there isn't.
Right.
I think they should be held to the highest standard.
Absolutely.
But instead, they're held to their own standards, which is none.
Policed by their own people.
Right. Held to their own standards by their own people with arguably no enforcement. So not sure how to solve that one. I mean, criminalizing it would still require enforcement. This all comes back to enforcement anyway. Even if all these things existed, I don't know that the enforcement would be enforced. I think there'd be a gap. We could beat it to death, that's for sure. All right, next up, term limits. This is an easy one. I think this puts a damper on everything we've discussed. Okay, so one of the recommendations has been 3 terms in the House, which is 6 years, and 2 terms in the Senate, so 12 years max. And obviously, fresh blood is limiting the depth of the corruption and the depth of the cesspool and grifting and everything else.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
will they ever pass that? No.
When's the last time it came up for a vote?
I don't
And
know.
when it came, when's the last time? It
I'd have to
actually
look that
made it somewhere at some point, and it was shot down, obviously. And this is my daily biblical input that we really love. Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
So we wrestle against those things, but that doesn't mean worldly.
So therefore, we put on the armor of God. It's this stuff we're talking about. Corruption. To me, it's evil. You know,
But it's all worldly.
it's worldly, which is evil. It's
And
controlled by those
you
things.
fight it worldly. No? If there's a worldly darkness.
No one says you not have to fight against good and evil. I'm not making that statement. But what's controlling it? Okay, we
Okay.
don't have to take
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And then the last one I've got on my list as far as proposals here is banning personal use of campaign funds. So tighten restrictions and auditing on campaign fund use. All the lavish perks we kind of talked about earlier, meals, travel, attire, all that nonsense. When
What was the big one recently? Was it Stacey Abrams?
she
She had a big one, didn't she?
she just had a big one. Yeah.
I mean, like millions and millions
Yeah.
going towards something of her foundation or something.
Yeah. Let me pull this up here. I don't want to misspeak.
And doesn't she write soft
not
porn novels too? She writes like soft porn.
Does she?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she writes soft porn books. Heavy romantic books.
Oh, yeah, heavy romance.
She looks really trustworthy to me.
I mean,
Oh man.
and see even this, right? When I go try to look up information on
On her.
Stacey Abrams, am I getting factual information or am I getting filtered nonsense to protect the lie and keep the money
She had a foundation.
flowing, you know?
I mean, it was a heavy amount of money that was going to.
$2 billion government grant.
Yeah. Billions. I wanted to say billion.
billion
Yeah, billion.
dollar grant from the
That's
EPA.
2,000 million people.
I think the average person certainly loses the scale and scope of money. That's why they have that time reference, right? Like, what is $1 billion, you know? And it's hard to get your head wrapped around it.
1,000 million.
Yeah,
That helps.
it does help. Right. It's,
That
break,
helps.
it's
When
breaking
you
it down
say
into
one
manageable chunks.
Versus 1,000 million. Which she got 2,000 million in a grant or so. I don't know. Jeez Louise. But yeah, you're circling back to using campaign, whatever. She's getting a grant, a government grant, because of her spot and wherever she did or whoever's, whatever, she brown nosed, whatever happened. How'd she get that? Like $2 billion. She got it on the up and up, buddy.
Lobbyists.
She earned it.
Yeah, earned it.
She earned it.
I'm sure her work has
Yes,
amassed $2 billion value.
Oh, yeah.
All right, man. Well, that's the list I've got today.
Lots of these are the same old problems.
Agreed.
Same old issues.
Same old.
With kindergarten fixes.
Can we fix the federal government policies
With a kindergarten teacher.
with the kindergarten teachers' policies? I
Look
think
it up,
that
people. The things you needed to know, learned in kindergarten.
I think that would be a great reset, personally.
Yes. Bingo. This
All
can't
right.
be any more simplistic.
Thanks for the chat. We'll see you on the next one.